He said, I won't be home for my birthday, Dad. He was 4 days short of his 21st when he was killed, but I should be home shortly afterwards. So we were preparing 21st birthday celebrations for him. Cards were arriving, but sadly he never came back to see or celebrate his 21st birthday. There was great concern about the safety out there. Just 18 men to patrol and police an area the size of Northern Ireland. And then when I heard the news that 6 RMP had been killed, I didn't like those odds, 6 out of 18. That's a high percentage that Tom may be well be one of them, because in the early days, they didn't notify families first. You would just hear on the news that a soldier had been killed in Iraq, and you just hoped you never got the knock on the door. It soon became clear from Tom's letters home that this wasn't a war of necessity. It was more of a Tony Blair war of option. The equipment they had was dire. No body armour, as I've said before, no desert boots. Their communications were a disaster. Each section should have had 2 forms of communication before being deployed. They didn't even have one that was effective. So it was all this information that was being fed back that I was glad when Tom told me, Dad, I've got 2 weeks to go. And then he rang me to say we'd been descaled. That means what equipment they'd got left was taken off and put back into stores. He had smoke grenades, his hand grenades, his morphine, distress flares. Most of the ammunition was taken from him. He was given just 50 rounds and still in a war zone being deployed into hostile areas. And for me that is a disgrace. These are professional soldiers to do a professional job, and they were actually dying without the basic tools of their trade. When complaining about their communications, their senior officers would just say, tough, get on with it. Now for me that is just a cavalier attitude to their personal safety and welfare, and those officers in the Board of Inquiry were brought to task on this, and the Army investigate themselves behind locked doors, I will add, so we had no input into that, and their findings were systemic failings in the chain of command as applied by individuals on the ground. Now we know who those individuals are, we know who those officers are, but no action or court-martial ever took place, and for me that's a travesty of justice. And for the official findings to say the deaths could not have been prevented is just a total lie. Without adequate equipment, they'd be alive today. I know John Miller is constantly pressing the Foreign Secretary now to effect some sort of action in Iraq over these killers, but when you see the state of Iraq, nothing is going to happen out there whatsoever. And I always recall the words here of Jack Straw. When those red caps were killed, he stood up in the House, Foreign Secretary at the time, and said, and I quote, "We vow to bring these killers to justice." Like hell he has. They're still out there now. What are those words now, Mr. Straw? Well, why aren't you a man of honour and made sure that happened? You still have an influence within government. Why don't you influence the current Foreign Secretary to get it sorted? But nobody's interested. And as I've said before, it's merely as if they lost 6 Land Rovers. It's how it seems to me. 6 pieces of military hardware. If these had been 6 diplomats, 6 correspondents, I dare say it would have been different. I'd like to think I can now draw a line under Iraq after this inquiry and then push that dark cloud away and then rebuild my life. But it has to be said, a country has gone to war, 179 British personnel have died, 30-odd thousand have been maimed, you've got well over 150,000 innocent Iraqi men, women and children have died. Nobody's been brought to account. There is no accountability here. Tony Blair took us to war against the UN. We did not have a UN resolution. Other strong European nations did not join us, France, Germany, etc. It took us into a very controversial war without UN backing. And I just beggars belief for me that there has been no accountability anywhere. There's been no accountability from the MOD, from senior politicians, from Tony Blair, Alistair Campbell, he was in charge of the spin machine. All these people that were key figures in the demise of Iraq that we see today, now that meltdown of that country, have all walked through it with impunity. I'd like to see maybe somebody held to account for this. If not legally, just morally held to account.
Heart.